In this section, you'll hear two students, Susan and Peter, giving a presentation during a tutorial. In the first part, Susan talks about the problem of waste in cities. First, look at questions 1 and 2. Now listen to the first part of the presentation and answer questions 1 and 2.
Good morning, everyone. Now, whose turn is it to do their mini presentation today? Peter and Susan. OK. What topic did the two of you decide on in the end?
We thought we'd have a look at the problem of waste in cities.
Fine. Well, when you're ready.
OK. One of the many problems about cities is that they create such an enormous amount of rubbish. I've got some figures here to show you. How does this thing work?
Press the on button.
Right. Well, as you can see from the graph, New York produces about 15 million kilograms of waste a day. It's a world record.
But not exactly one to be proud of.
No. And Tokyo comes next with about 11 million. Basically, the richer the city, the more rubbish it generates. The thing is that in developing countries, much more waste is recycled, so there's less to dispose of. If you compare Los Angeles and Calcutta, for example, they both have roughly the same population, but Los Angeles produces about 10 million kilograms of rubbish, while Calcutta, a much poorer city, only produces half of that, 5 million kilograms.
You forgot to mention Mexico City.
Yes, Mexico City's huge, but it only generates about 7 million kilograms, less than half the figure for New York. Now, the big question is, what do we do with all this rubbish? At the moment, most of it ends up on rubbish tips or buried underground, which is a terrible waste of resources.
In the second part of the discussion, the professor talks about public transport in different cities. As you listen to the discussion, complete the questions about public transport.
Now, on that topic of public transport, I read somewhere recently that Australia isn't doing too badly in the challenge to increase the use of public transport.
Better than America, granted. But by comparison with Canada, it's not so good. For instance, if you compare Toronto with the U.S. metropolis of Detroit, only 160 kilometers away, in Detroit, only 1% of passenger travel is by public transport, whereas in Toronto it's 24%. Which is considerably better than Sydney, which can only boast 16%.
Well, I think it's encouraging that our least car-dependent city is actually our largest city. 16% of trips being taken on public transport in Sydney isn't too bad.
But it's a long way behind Europe. Take both London and Paris, for instance, where 30% of all trips taken are on public transport.
Well, they do both have an excellent underground system.
And Frankfurt comes in higher still at 32%.
I understand that they've been very successful in Copenhagen at ridding the city of the car. Can you tell us anything about that experiment?